Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Lauren Maffeo, CDO Magazine editorial board member and author of the book Designing Data Governance from the Ground Up, which is published by the Pragmatic Programmers. I have the pleasure of speaking with Matthew Cawsey, who is the product marketing and strategy lead at Stibo Systems, based in the United Kingdom. So thank you all for joining us today for this conversation, and especially you, Matthew. Thank you for joining us today to speak to us about your work in data governance and specifically master data governance. But Matthew, before we get into the conversation about master data governance today, I would love to start by asking you to tell me about yourself, who you are, where you grew up, and where you live now, and then ultimately what led you to join the data world in your career.
Sure. Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. So yeah, that's a long story. So I've been working in the data and data management world for best part of 25 years now. So you know, it started a long time back as even as far ago back as college, when I was making myself some pocket money by doing some database development and design just for a small company, and that progressed to becoming an Oracle DBA, actually. That then moved me into a pre-sales technical role within the software sales environment, where I sort of helped out with sales presentations and demos and building technical proofs of concepts, that sort of thing in databases, and ultimately moved towards sales and marketing. It's too hard to keep track of all the technology and keep learning programming languages. So moved over to the sales and marketing side of things. But that's always been within, even the earliest software company I was in was around data migration and data integration. And then it became very clear that to make data migration projects successful, you needed to really understand the data that you were moving. And that was the first steps to doing data profiling and data quality work, so that you could try and get these things done correct first time, rather than sort of finding data errors. And that's just sort of simply progressed from that data integration, data quality to master data management. And obviously a very critical part of master data management is data governance, or master data governance, which I'll explain what I consider the difference to be. So that's been a long tenure, very much involved in data management all along in various guises. I'm currently at Stibo Systems. I'm living in the southeast of England, Tunbridge Wells in Kent, and I've been with Stibo Systems for about 3.5 years now as their product marketing lead on our NDM platform.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot there to cover, especially in this new AI age where there is more data than ever, and people sometimes act like things such as data governance are new or beyond control or beyond one person's role. And I think they are beyond one person's role, but you just proved through your career that you've been doing this for decades. And so it's not new, but the volume of data is new, which poses challenges. And that brings us to the core of what we'll talk about today, which is the difference between master data governance and data governance, if there is a difference at all. So your intro was the perfect segue to that first question. In your view, how does master data governance differ from traditional data governance practices, if at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you're right. It's just going back to your previous, the older than new. So the AI conversation is always new. There's always new data, but the old garbage in, garbage out phrase never goes away, and it actually never gets fixed. And I guess that leads to what's the difference between master data governance and traditional data governance? And it's a fairly simple distinction, really. Traditional data governance focuses on managing data across the entire organization. Now, that could be analytical data, operational data, IoT data, any unstructured data, videos, emails, documents. Whereas sort of master data governance specifically concentrates on ensuring accuracy and consistency, the integrity of core data elements, which we know as master data, but And to give that some kind of definition, master data is that cornerstone data that's essential for operations in business to move around. So it might encompass who are your customers, your products, your employees, your suppliers, and your key locations. This kind of master data is relatively stable over time, whereas a lot of broader organizational data, transaction information is changing potentially every second and is new and being used, but it needs to be tied to a cornerstone. That's the master data. So master data governance is the process of applying policies and rules to that critical data in an organization, potentially within an MDM platform, master data management platform, and it's not looking at all that other kind of information. That's a much broader purview.
In the software world, we have languages, programming languages, and then we also have frameworks that help you apply those particular software languages in more niche contexts. When we think about frameworks for data governance, it feels like there are both many and none at the same time. And I think that's something our industry struggles with, is this lack of a universal definition or governing body that can give that single source of truth. And so when you think about what makes a master data governance framework successful, what are the key components in your view of a framework that can successfully be applied to master data governance?
Yeah, straight in with the $1 million question, Lauren. Well, I guess the most important thing is that in the first place, you have one. You've got some kind of data governance framework or data governance operating model. And I guess it could be an entire consulting workshop to figure out what is a successful one. And you're absolutely right. You need a quick browse of the internet will give you 100 variants of a master data governance framework. There are certain things that I would say are crucial to its success, and I could say the obvious things: people, process, technology, which is all true, but just to, I guess, unpack that a little. The first critical thing is to have executive sponsorship of implementing data governance in a large organization. It was that there will be resistance to change. There will be conflict. There will be change management issues. There will be reasons to stop. It will be difficult at times, and you need that exec sponsorship to be able to push things through, or maybe use the stick instead of the carrot at times. There's sort of underneath that some very simple things. What are your policies, the processes that you have for implementing those policies, and who's deciding them and who's implementing them. So very clear roles and responsibilities, like a RACI, I suppose, responsible, accountable, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I always think is often missed, or at least pushed to the side, is education and training for the business staff. And it's really critical to bring the regular business staff along with you on that data governance journey to get their buy-in. Otherwise, it's really hard on the ground to get things done. And that education just means making your policies absolutely crystal clear, why you're doing it, why it's important to your organization's success, how it will work in the organization, what it means to people's individual roles and jobs. Will it make it easier for them? Who's responsible, and what does it align to in terms of helping them achieve their business goals? So that just keeping them educated and trained as to why you're doing it, rather than just putting these guardrails in place, which can appear burdensome. So I suppose that there are sort of, I tend to have sort of in my mind 5 key pillars for these things. You need a core MDM group established as sort of the Data Governance Council, who define the roles of people, the ownership, the stewards, the data owners, and the exec sponsor. Then there's the policies, I guess the standards, the procedures that want to be implemented. Importantly, along with being able to, measurable, like all good projects, are there KPIs to ensure that the governance is meeting business needs? Data quality management, I guess I have a particular fondness for this because it's been part of my background, Lauren. But I'm a huge believer that data quality management is a huge part of data governance, and it's just ensuring that now, if anything else fails, is your data understood, clean, accurate, consistent, unambiguous, and trustworthy? Can you make business decisions on information that you trust?
Yeah.
Then, of course, there's the technology piece. When I say the people, process, and tools, yes, you need something like an MDM, but there are other things as well for broader governance. So you have data dictionaries, glossaries, data catalogs. These are really important in terms of everyone having a clear understanding of the definitions of data, not just their technical definitions, but their definitions in context. So, when somebody talks about a customer, everyone knows what they mean by a customer. Is that a prospect, or is it somebody who was a customer 10 years ago? Just having clear definitions is really helpful. And then the final part of that is the more operational side of it: security of data, compliance to standards, compliance to regulatory standards, and the education and training and communication that I was just talking about. So I think that's the 5 pillars that I think are sort of critical to building this operating model of.
Yep, I agree. So I published a book last year called Designing Data Governance from the Ground Up, which addresses much of what you just talked about: getting an executive sponsor, selecting stewards, making sure that key tasks are owned by particular people. And all of that comes back to what I think our industry struggles with, which partially is due to not having a lot of case studies about data governance done right or well. Even when I was speaking with readers of the book, they said it would really help to have a lot more specific case studies and examples in there of data governance that is correct or done well. And what I have found, I don't disagree with them at all, but what I found is that companies are very reticent to talk about their work in this space, and getting somebody to not only speak on the record, but then to talk about success with data governance is very difficult, more than I would expect or hope for.
Yeah.
So in your
Yeah.
life work, what are some examples of master data governance that you have seen that you believe have succeeded and helped drive tangible value in an organization?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I would concur with what you said, Lauren. Getting public references to this is difficult. It's like hanging out your dirty washing. Worked in the data quality world. Everybody has data quality challenges, but nobody wants to admit it or admit how bad it is. I guess it's a competitive lever, but so it's difficult to get organizations to confess to this stuff. But yes, of course, there are instances of successful implementations, and I guess it's one of the difficulties is understanding what defines success. Because these models are varied and different organizations will have different degrees of governance that they want to implement. But we have a huge global CPG that at Stibo Systems we work with. Unfortunately, I can't use their name. Like you said, it's difficult to get them exactly right. Difficult to get them to say it, but they've implemented a huge global sort of multi-domain MDM project with product data, supplier data, location data. Now, just away from the data side, as an enterprise-wide project, that spans a lot of business units and different organizational silos who generally are self-indulgent. They're only concerned about the data that affects them. They want to have their arms wrapped around that and no one else to touch it. So they're self-preserving for themselves. There's a lot of stakeholders, and this was kind of the background to the project. There were a lot of stakeholders, and that gave rise to lots of conflict in the planning phase about what those data definitions were that we discussed, and who owns the data, how should it be used, who's allowed to update it, etc., etc. And this was all part of the planning process, but alongside the MDM deployment, we were able to provide business advisory services, professional services, consulting, if you like, that alongside the technology implementation, you have to do that hand in hand with your customer to implement this data governance operating model to make sure your MDM project successful in the main place. And Gartner talk about master data management projects failing 60-70% of the time. That's typically not down to the tech. It's down to change management, adoption, data governance, and whether you've got that sort of collaboration in the organization. But they did get it right because they took it seriously, and it resulted in a significant reduction in data errors. Well, what does that mean? It meant that there was a lot less rework of information, straight through processing in various processes like order to cash processes, etc. They just worked more smoothly. Decision making was improved. People were making trustworthy decisions. All the stuff that you expect me to say. But importantly, it brought that organization into alignment, and it had clear ownership, clear definitions, clear accountability. And so that results to really start to positively impact business as usual. That the data governance program then gains more acceptance, you get more internal support, and quite simply, it just made people's jobs easier, as well as providing better results. But it's always a bumpy road. I can't sit here and say, yes, have a data governance operating model and it'll be fantastically easy. I mean, that's just not the reality, but it'll be a lot worse if you don't have one.
Right. It sounds to me like you described a data mesh architecture pattern that's domain driven. And so it sounded from what you were saying like each line of business had its own data domain with it, and then subdomains to keep data even more organized. And so then from there, it was more of a federated approach where the different data stewards per domain could give those data definitions, make them more accessible to people within the organization. And so I liken it to information architecture, which is meant inherently to structure your information on a website in a cohesive way that aligns with what users need. It sounds to me like your client implemented domain-driven data mesh in a federated way, and that's
I'm pretty certain they didn't know what data mesh was at the time, but it really is a reflection of that. Yeah.
So this has been a great conversation with you, Matthew Cawsey of Stibo Systems. Thank you so much for speaking with CDO Magazine today. Where can listeners and viewers find you to connect with you further if they wanted to learn more about anything that we discussed in this interview?
Yes, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, as Matthew Cawsey. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me on email, mcaw@stibosystems.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Matthew, for taking the time to speak with us today, and best of luck on your data governance journey.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And good luck,
Likewise.
everyone.